Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Microsoft 365 Business Boost show. Today, we got a special guest. It's not you, Nick. You know what I'm saying? You are a guest.
I'm not
not a guest,
special.
but you know what I'm saying? You're special. You're just not a guest.
Oh, thank you.
You know what I mean? So shout out to you. But today we have Stephanie Roberto. Stephanie, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you guys. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Good deal. I like that. I
Good
like
to have
that.
you.
Now, listen, we got a few topics that we're going to get into as usual. But before we do, Stephanie, if you want, just give us a quick intro. You know what I mean? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am a technology strategist and account manager with Tier 1 Performance. We're out of Cincinnati, Ohio. We are a consulting company that does work with people and performance and all that fun. And a big part of my job is working in the Microsoft platform, helping people use it better, similar to what you guys talk about all the time. I have a background in software development, but more recently been more focused on low code, no code, and helping people that are not developers, not technically savvy, or so they would call themselves, use the technology a bit better and get more out of it. So that is a little bit about me. I have some content online that I like to share in this space, and I'm just looking forward to talking about nerding out about Microsoft today.
Good deal. Yeah. Well, the fact that, you speak to those people, that means you're in the right place, because we like to speak to the business owners as well. You know what I mean? Folks that are not necessarily sitting there knee deep in the tech, but they need to know about this stuff. So good to have you here. Nick.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there was a big event, since the last time we spoke. It wasn't the Business Boost birthday party. You know what I mean?
Was it Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it wasn't Thanksgiving either.
Oh, okay.
It was Microsoft Ignite.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The big yearly yearly party that they have, talking about all the new stuff that's coming out. So, which deja vu. We did this last year. So yeah, we celebrated our birthday, and I remember we talked about what happened at Ignite last year early on this show. So now here we are again. Time is flying. So I wanted to talk about SharePoint. There was some updates that came out of there, but in particular, one of the things that I saw was this new flexible layout. So anybody who manages pages or creates sites in SharePoint, they'll see that, or they should know, the page is pretty much broken down into sections. Your intranet, if it's running on SharePoint, you build these pages. These pages are broken off into sections, and inside of those sections is where we put web parts. And the web parts is where I say is where the magic where the magic happens.
Yeah.
So now, when you add a new section to your page, it has like a 12-column grid, and so now you could pretty much put anything inside of there anywhere that you want. It's like super flexible. So they're saying this is supposed to be coming, I think first quarter next year, I believe. So the thing I wanted to point out, well, first, did you see this?
Yes. So
Good
excited.
deal. Yeah. I'm very excited about it too. Now, before I give my thoughts, I definitely want to go around the room and see what y'all think. But Stephanie, what's your thoughts on this new flexible section layout situation?
Well, when a lot of our clients had to be moved onto modern, they were pretty disappointed with the results, right? Because it was very cookie cutter, not a lot of options for layout. And I just said, guys, just wait. I promise it's going to get better and better and better over time. And this is, they've been making good on that promise. So there's been lots of different things. The background images in particular helped breathe some life and personality. And so this, I'm excited and I'm nervous. I used to actually do a lot of front-end development. I was a master of like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? And did a lot with Flex right before I kind of moved out of development roles. And it's really powerful, but it can be a little hard to conceptualize as you're designing. So the thing that went off to me is like, oh, it'll be great to coach people through making good design decisions, thinking about the user, thinking about the flow of information, a lot of those UI and UX principles that I've been able to do in the past, we get to bring more of those in now. So I was very excited, and I loved the idea of people being able to have more freedom on the page to express or tell their story in a visual way. So I was excited. You know, I'm an optimist when it comes to Microsoft. I know there'll be weird stuff. I know something basis, but you know, to me, it's a great move in the right direction.
Yeah, same here. I'm excited about that too. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I think it's interesting that we continue to go down the path of designing SharePoint, because I think when SharePoint became the online thing that it is now, there was this drive to kind of look at SharePoint in a very similar way to how we look at like the other apps in Microsoft 365. You know, like no one looks at Word and says, I want the visuals of Word to be customized for my business. Like, I'm not aware of anyone who like opens Excel and says, I'm not using this because it doesn't use my my corporate color scheme. And there was this drive to have SharePoint just be an app, essentially, that did a certain thing, and you used it, and it looked like SharePoint, and it looked like SharePoint for everyone, because we had gone down this road of having these very elaborately designed almost websites. Like at one point, you could put a website in SharePoint. You could have your SharePoint website that pointed out into the world, and Microsoft got rid of that some time ago. So I think it's really interesting that this is an area where the drive for design keeps getting more and more, and Microsoft keeps picking up that drive for design to be able to do this, rather than kind of clamping down on, well, this is the way it works and this is the way it looks, which is kind of where we are with the other aspects of Microsoft 365 in a way. Like, I don't think we necessarily get a choice there. So is it good? Yeah, if you want to do that, I think it's good. But I think ultimately, a lot of the time, it's better to think about content than it is to think about how that content looks. Like, it's about getting people the right information. And particularly in the age of using a tool like Copilot, it's about how well can your AI understand the information that you're giving it, rather than making it look lovely so that it's appealing to the people who are consuming it, because are they actually consuming it through SharePoint, or are they just getting Copilot to summarize it for them?
Right. Yeah. So about that, I remember this, you know what I mean? Which is interesting that Stephanie mentioned that when her folks came from old school and first got on modern, that they were, you know, she had to temper well, they weren't excited, but she had to temper them. Right. And I'm like, I remember when we made the jump from classic to modern, my folks were in a better place because modern basic was so much better than what classic looked like. You know what I mean? And so they were good with that. But to your point about design, I agree with this whole, you know, the content is more important design type situation. But I also have grown to learn why the design is important. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a reason why it's a whole entire industry of people out there to do this stuff, and why I also speak up and say, I tell my clients, I'm not a designer. I can make it work, but I'm not going to make it look good. You know what I'm saying? Like that's on purpose, because I know that there's a whole lot that goes into that. So even like with basic information that you put on a SharePoint page for somebody to consume, yeah, we can get there. That's not a problem. But then when you got tons of content, and now you have to start thinking about how you would lay it out and how you get people to find it easily and make their eyes track to a certain place on the page and all this other stuff, super important. But who Microsoft is talking to, I think it's me. You know what I'm saying? I think that when they put this type of stuff out, they're talking to people like me, because I understand what I'm doing with SharePoint on behalf of my clients. I don't think that they're talking to people who don't know about SharePoint, because most people, I feel like they're floating out there and they don't know about SharePoint. They're not going to be like, hey, Microsoft said you could do these things with SharePoint sites, SharePoint pages. Now I'm interested. You know what I'm saying? That to me is for people who already know what SharePoint is about. So it's like, I don't know. These announcements are always like weird to me when it comes to SharePoint, but I also think SharePoint is like in a special place. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's like Word. How you mentioned Word is not like something where people are trying to design, but they'll make a what's that thing called? A letterhead. They'll design up a letterhead and want to make it look good. Stephanie, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I love these points. I think they're right in that, especially in the age of AI and these chat interfaces, although I believe that the chat interfaces will eventually change and we won't just be in a text-based chat interface. It'll continue to get more and more robust. But to Nick's point, into yours, yeah, like utilitarian, like this is a place to host files and to serve them up when you search for them or you ask the AI to go find them. I don't think that's wrong. As somebody that is an artist and works with tons of clients, there is like a bit of like frivolousness, whimsy, and self-expression that I don't think we necessarily should discount when we're thinking about our digital experiences. People want it, whether it is useful or not. And so to me, if I was just looking at the out of the box stuff all the time, I wouldn't be very inspired. I might not get some of that culture that a lot of, because I work with a lot of enterprise clients, and that's so important, especially when you're thousands of people big. Sometimes the only way they're interfacing with the company is through the intranet, right? Or Teams or whatever. So it is a place to express the company's brand, internal and external. Is it necessary from like a data utilitarian get your job done? No. But from a culture and feeling connected and feeling inspired, I do think that it does help. And there's certainly, depending on if they go to a site, there's certain things you can do to help them get something, but then maybe discover something new. Now, I don't think we're going out to their intranet like a lot. I don't, but it still has its place. And I loved your point, Thurman, about this is an announcement for people like us. Right.
Yeah.
And we have to take it and say, like, here's what this means for you. If you wanted to do more of a process map that was clickable and interactive, right? People love to do that, even though I try to tell them not to. They love to do it. And now we can do that, right? We have more spaces on the page where we can put these interactive elements, right? So that's how you got to take it from, yes, this technical thing now exists, to the business case, right? And to me, that's what's so exciting about all of it.
Well, Stephanie, I'll tell you, a while ago, I told Nick that my wife has a doll room. Like, she collects dolls. And she was like, hey, can you build something so I can inventory these things? Because I got to get these things in order. I put together something real quick and I gave it to him, like, yo, you can put all your stuff on here. And then she never used it. And then weeks later, I'm like, yo, why did you ask me to make this and you're not even using it? She's like, well, it wasn't cute.
Yes. I like your wife. Agreed. Yeah.
That's like a real thing, Nick. So, Nick, in me and your world, you know what I'm saying?
It could have been worse, and she could have put it in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly. So, design, I know design is important. It's a whole thing, you know what I'm saying? It's just that my brain doesn't go there first, but, it's a graphic designer, a guy I used to work with back in the days, he made me realize why that's a pretty big deal. So I'm still in. I like it. I'm excited about where SharePoint is going. I'm very, very much looking forward to the future. And I remember way back when there was talks about, SharePoint dying and, they don't know if they're going to still keep SharePoint. And that's a different time. Now it's like thriving. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to what's going on here.
Yes, me too.
Nick, what about you? What did you see out of Ignite that caught your eye that you would like to bring to the table here?
Agents, and more agents, I would say, is what caught my eye at Ignite. And I mean, we were expecting this because we had the second wave announcements for Copilot a couple of months back, so we knew what was coming in many ways. But I do think it's interesting how suddenly we've stepped into this kind of agentic world, and I think actually upfront, admittedly, by Microsoft, not because there's been any huge step change in the technology, but just because that's where the nomenclature of the industry has gone. And so Microsoft talking about copilots when everyone else is talking about agents actually doesn't make a huge amount of sense. So this drive towards everything that was a copilot kind of is now going to be an agent kind of, makes sense within the wider industry as to what it's doing. But there's a lot of very powerful stuff there. I mean, we're still some way away from this idea of having a copilot or an agent or whatever you would call it that is kind of your assistant from one end of the day to the other. You don't have this kind of proactive, like Iron Man and Jarvis kind of relationship where, someone's... I'm sorry, is that a little bit too close to Terminator for you, Thurman, or are we good with that?
No,
we're good with that? Okay.
We're good. As a matter of fact, I meant to tell you yesterday, during Thanksgiving, we watched Terminator 2 as a family.
Oh, my goodness.
That I need to tell you about.
Oh, my goodness. You still,
go ahead.
You still haven't got a co-pilot, but you have got a Terminator. So
yes.
there we go. But yeah, I think that we're still some way away from that kind of completely proactive, I'm there to assist you, I know what you're doing. There's pieces of that technology puzzle that we don't have, but we are closer to having Copilot being something that helps us without us always having to drive it. And I think that's a very interesting aspect of it, and just getting the type of help you need when you need it. The extensibility stuff that was there before was not very easy to access, not very reliable to access, and I think we're in a much better place now with what's been announced. So I'm excited about agents, even though I'm not someone who's like, oh, well, just because everyone else is calling it an agent, we should too. But at the end of the day, Microsoft has to sell this stuff, so it makes sense that that's the direction they've gone in.
I agree. It makes perfect sense. Stephanie, where are you with the agents? What's your take there?
I love the whole, buzzword. You're basically talking kind of about like aligning language and buzzwords and things like that. Yet, these agents, you can call them agents, copilots, GPTs. The key word I think is autonomous, which is kind of the new thing that's coming through, right? And to me, I'm like, well, how is that different from like Power Automate, which it is. But, I'm just thinking like, well, we've had autonomous workflows that trigger off of certain events. So, what are we really dealing with here? I was very excited about all the announcements just because what I saw was an investment in both the kind of robust Azure AI. I don't know what they're calling it now. They had a name for it.
Azure AI Foundry, I think is.
Foundry, yes. And they always have naming problems. Teams and teams and teams, SharePoint teams and teams, right? Copilot. But to me, that was exciting, right? A lot of it seemed like rebranding of stuff that was already there, but it showed me the direction they're going, right? So we're still investing heavily in tools for Azure, kind of your beefy developers doing, working on making their own natural language models, using semantic curl, all those things, right? Like the robust stuff that could then be accessed by business users, right? That are, creating autonomous agents. Maybe that agent is going and has a certain set of criteria to clean up your files like once a month, which is my big thing that I'll get into maybe here on this podcast is, what do you need, right? It's cool that this stuff is available, but like, how does it actually work into your flow of work? And like, and breaking down the barrier of what does this mean for you? And then demos are great, but they're always working off of like the perfect data conditions and access conditions. That is just not reality, right? Working with tons of clients across, tons of Fortune 500 clients across all industries. Everybody has this problem of their data's a mess. It's outdated. It's not, the metadata doesn't exist, right? Nobody knows where anything is. Things are still on shared drives or local or whatever, right? So while I'm excited about it, I was hoping to see a little bit more focus on data cleanup or managing the data, or agents, they kind of started hitting at it, but like agents that can start to help recognize patterns in data and clean your data up so that you don't get garbage when you ask it for something, which has been my experience in the beginning with Copilot. Was a lot of it was garbage because admittedly, like, our stuff wasn't in the best shape either, right? The Commerce Kit gets no shoes. I'm curious what you think, Thurman. Like, what was your take on it?
Well, about what Nick was talking about, how the rest of the industry is using certain kind of jargon and Microsoft is using their own. I think this is a branding thing that they were leaning into, and because to my point earlier about SharePoint, who are you talking to? You know what I'm saying? So now they went and had a whole entire Super Bowl commercial talking about Copilot and all the things that it could do. A typical end user or a business owner or someone has to understand this in a very basic way. So them updating to say agents because the rest of the industry is using that terminology, I think is a massive deal, because tech people they're going to get it. And they're going to, even if they don't get it, they're going to go and try to figure it out because they know, you know, what we need to do here. But if you're trying to talk to people and let them know how to use a thing and how it will benefit them and how easy it is, you have to use extremely plain language, and then you have to be able to answer questions in a very plain way. And I think that right now, I believe Microsoft is still kind of struggling with that. Because if you go to talk to someone and ask them about, you know, just some basic Copilot questions, I believe that it'll be a little bit confusing for them to answer.
I even think the tech you're people. Kind of right. You're kind of right, but I think this. What they're doing with extensibility now was where it started off was incredibly confusing. And in my view, extensibility is the foundation. You know, like if you can't allow Copilot to get to your data, then Copilot is useless. You know, if it's just going to be scoped to some of your stuff, then what's the point of it? And where they started off with extensibility was this confusing mess of like basically every asset that we can build across Microsoft 365. Yeah, you could use that for extensibility. Let's give you a huge list of things that you can turn on and off, and then you just need to remember what they do. Easy, right? This new framework of like wrapping this stuff in agents, and what you call them, whether you call them copilots, whether you call them agents, whatever you call them, doesn't really matter. But this concept of using that as an asset that wraps up these other assets, whether it be triggers, whether it be actions, it's the instructions, it's the data, it makes so much more sense. And I've had a number of workshops that I've done with people through the course of the year talking about extensibility, talking about how do you get Copilot to look at your data. And I've had highly technical people in meetings where after an hour of talking about it, they're still scratching their head and they still don't understand. A couple of weeks ago, I had a one-on-one hour with a non-technical CEO of a small business, and within that hour, he was able to build an agent that is actually going to help him every day. And that's the difference. The difference is that we now have something that can be real, you can make it work, it's relevant, and it's understandable. And I think in this change from copilots to agents, a lot of us have kind of missed that they've actually fixed a big problem that was there before and made this work. It didn't work before. Now it works.
Oh, well, that's a huge deal. I agree. Saying if they're fixing something that didn't work before and now works, especially to your point about having a training with the business owner. You know what I mean? That's huge. That's a big deal. Huge deal in my eyes. So because the us technical people knowing about things and, you know, talking about things, it's important. You know what I mean? It's definitely part of the puzzle. But the majority of people that we need to know these things are business owners who talk to other business owners, who drive decisions, who, you know, they call the shots and they push things forward or, you know, pull things back or whatever. So it's important for them to know what the deal is. You know what I'm saying? So that's encouraging to your point that, you know, the comparison between these two training sessions. So good deal there.
Yeah.
What you got, Stephanie? I was about to ask you what you thought about Ignite.
Oh, well, that I was just gonna say, like, that's huge that you were like, just the language changing alone. And what comes to mind for me is like, was it the changing of the language, and some of this extensibility helped you explain it in a different way, and then the demo or them being able to work in the interface was more, it clicked better. It sounds like. So it sounds like, yes, the technical pieces, like the wrapper, as you said, I thought that was really, really good point. But then I think that interface piece of they could actually see how to hook these things together in a visual way is so important for most people. They can't imagine this world in their heads. They need to see it on the screen. And that was some of my biggest pains with, when we first rolled out, was it, wasn't clear how everything was working together. So I am excited, to your point, Nick. I think you're right. I think it's more significant than it looks on the surface. And hopefully we can get more people to start using it. Thurman, to your point, I do think it is still very challenging to know what SKUs to recommend, what maybe that will change now. Like, when you're working with small businesses and with the C-suite, you can move so much faster. I think this is actually a huge opportunity for small to mid-sized businesses to grow exponentially faster, because enterprise businesses, you're under layers and layers and layers of hierarchies and systems and bureaucracies, and even more so, I'm sure, in like the government sector, where even to get to the right person to get you a license for what you want to access the thing you want could be weeks of conversations. So it's not even about the technology for me. It's like, I need the language and the value proposition to make the business case to get the client access to what they need to even build a prototype. So it moves so much slower right now in the enterprise space than I think it does in the small to mid-market space. I'm saying I'm jealous.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, those things. It's beautiful when you got that small team that's, knocking things out of the park, and you get to easily access the full chain of command, but more importantly, the top of that chain of command. So yeah, I'm with you. I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get the right people bought into what you're trying to do, I think that's important as well, because I do think there's this perhaps driver for people who are in the tech space within businesses to maybe push back a little, because some of the other conditions, the foundations for making this work, aren't maybe in the state that they want it to be. But I do think we've reached a point now where there's the potential for missing a bit of the opportunity here, because we need to get people used to using this technology. There's a learning curve to using this technology. And I keep saying that if 2024 was your year of adopting Copilot, then 2025, you need to look at that as your year of extending Copilot. We've given people the foundational skills. Now we need to give Copilot the capability to actually do the things that the people who are using it want to do. And I think if we can get that right, then when we sit here and we're talking about this next year after Ignite, then I think a lot of the organizations we're working with are likely to be in a very different position with this technology than they are right now.
Do you see Microsoft doing that? Are you saying, like, us who touch the businesses directly, we should be thinking this way to, help them think that way? Or are you saying
100%.
like Microsoft?
Oh, 100%. We have a tool set now that can be easily understood by a variety of people with different approaches and responsibilities when it comes to technology and the operations of businesses, to understand how Copilot can help them. It's easy to spin up, it's easy to demonstrate, it's easy to get them involved in building it and using it. So I think Microsoft has now given us, they hadn't initially, back in November of 2023, this tool set was terrible. But now they have given us a tool set to actually do this. And I think people in our roles need to be going out and helping businesses to do it, because we have the tools, we have the security tools, we have some of the governance tools. I mean, this stuff is going to get better, but the foundations, in my opinion at least, are there.
Gotcha. And this is their Achilles heel, is that they do put out before it's fully baked. And when you're as ubiquitous as Microsoft, and the hype is always more than the product, right? Always. I still think it's a solid product. I have to be tech agnostic because I'm a technology strategist and I have to recommend whatever, but I almost always recommend Microsoft because it's comprehensively the best bang for your buck. The thing, to your point, Nick, we're gonna be working uphill unless you are already working with a full Microsoft shop. In the enterprise world, everybody's got their own budgets. They might have gone and been dissatisfied with this and gone and bought something else. It's like pretty much it's the same old song. This has always been how it is. And so then you're working on this huge change management piece of getting them off of something that is more, I call it like hits the dopamine button a little bit more. Like ChatGPT hits the dopamine button way better than Copilot. Copilot had a lag. The results weren't as good. You couldn't do like image generation for like when you're coming up against something like ChatGPT where it's like instant, doesn't matter if it's right, people don't care, right? Mm-hmm. It's very satisfying, and Copilot didn't have that satisfying dopamine hit. And I'm not saying it's not a superior product. I think overall, like if you have an AI agent that has access to all of the graph data, it's incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. But your initial like showing of it, you're working uphill with all the people because they're going to be like, it's not as good of a product. People are building their own in-house stuff, which is just these terrible nerfed versions of the OpenAI API, right? So to me, I understand, obviously, like I'm not them and like they have to make these business decisions and stay competitive, but I would rather have had them announce this year and have like started with something a little bit stronger, a little bit more user friendly, a little bit snappier, because then we have to work with what I've been dealing with. And I'm sure Thurman has been dealing with the SharePoint world. It's like, well, I hate SharePoint, and their memory of it is 2010 SharePoint. Mm-hmm. And they're like, SharePoint sucks, we're not using that. And I say, well, it sucks until you meet me. Okay. And then we're going to have a good time. Right. So those are just some of the social, political, like psychological things that I think where we're going to spend more energy than we want to in 2025. Does that resonate with you guys? Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Thurman.
I was going to say, I remember talking to Nick about this a while ago, but I keep remembering this when we spoke about this on the show. When I said, ChatGPT is sexy, you know what I'm saying? And Microsoft, and what's the name isn't. And Nick was just like, well, yeah, Microsoft is not like a sexy company. You know what I'm saying? That's just not what they do. They it's a step-by-step, make this thing work, and then for the long haul type thing. So the dopamine hits that you're talking about, you are 1000% correct. But just Microsoft doesn't play in that world. You know what I mean? And whatever they're doing, some right, some wrong, whatever they're doing, it's working to the point where they have the most market share. They're still here to stay. People are trying to climb up the wall to get to them. You know what I mean? So I like the point of it's on us to, get out there and help these companies. I mean, it's always been that way. My brain thinks that way, but Microsoft could help by, doing some things a little bit better. But to the whole jumping out in front and putting things out there before it's fully baked, this is just that to me is almost par for the course. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's like, technically, in a technical mind, my mind is technical, I'd be like, wait, it's not ready. Don't put it out just yet. You know what I'm saying? Let's get this, make sure that we have this thing right, then we can put it out. But someone else's brain who understands how marketing works and, the dopamine and all this other stuff, they're like, listen, we got enough. Let's tell everybody about this and tell it to them excitedly. You know what I'm saying? We got to get them in the door.
True. Right.
The whole thing. So I am interested in all of it because I'm never going to be like, it's rare. I will sometimes say this is just an absolutely really bad direction that you're going in. But I try to be empathetic. I try to be empathetic and see what they might be thinking. But, Microsoft is included in the type of organizations you were just talking about. They're ginormous. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So they have to deal with certain things that small and, medium sized, that's
It's
not
true.
a problem for them. So, but Stephanie, I wanted to ask you, what did you see out of Ignite that caught your eye that you were like, what was most exciting for you out of Ignite?
I mean, you guys basically, the two things you guys mentioned were the things I was the most excited about. The Copilot for business users, the low-code Copilot Studio updates were the most exciting to me, simply for the same reasons that Nick mentioned, because it's going to make things more accessible for the people that I like to work with, right? So these are like teams of one, right? That their team, was all stripped down to the bare bones and they have to do like 3 people's jobs. So that, to me, I'm excited. Like, how can we take some of the jobs that you got handed without any increase in pay and start to use these Copilot agents in a low code, no code way? Because again, I'm not staffed and I'm not on retainer with these companies. So I'm always looking for the thing that's sustainable for them long term. So when I see things like the Azure stuff, I'm excited, but I will almost never recommend it because they don't have the infrastructure or the team to maintain the solution long term. But, right. Copilot, the updates to Copilot Studio for business users, some of those pre-baked agents that I think some of you probably already seen, like showing up in SharePoint and some of these places, I think that's great because it's putting them on the 30-yard line instead of 0, right? Mm-hmm. So some of those agents we would have had to build from scratch. Now they're there. You get a taste for how they could work just by, toggling them on. Then your mind starts to work, right? When you see it in context of your work environment, light switches start to turn on.
Yes,
so for
that's power. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I see it in SharePoint. I see what it's doing. Oh, could it do this? Like when I have a client that says, can it do this? I'm like, I've got them. Like, yes, like that phrase right there means that they're interested. And so to me, that was the most powerful thing. Even with Copilot Studio before this new announcement, I was still pretty hesitant on recommending it because I still felt like it wasn't low code enough, right? There was still a decent amount you had to configure. It was obscure, like how it was working, especially if like just the interface alone was very confusing. And when I saw this, I was really encouraged. It was like, I feel like if I left you with the keys to this, you wouldn't drive yourself off a cliff.
Yeah.
And that was like the most exciting part to me, honestly.
That is. I agree that the most exciting part of what we do is having people not drive off a cliff.
Yeah, it's not the sexiest thing, right? But it is, and some of the like the AI governance and security stuff was interesting too. Made me again more confident that like if these things are put in place, they will be able to do it in a way that doesn't have them mucking it up. Not that they're not smart, they are, but it's a huge new skill to take on. And if it's more like building a SharePoint page, which now, as long as I give them a good design, like they can go do, right? Mm-hmm. Like what are the possibilities? Like they might come and show me things that they've learned how to do. That's like my favorite part when we're almost in the sharing back and forth level, because they're going to have experiences and problems and ways of thinking that are different from mine. So that's what's exciting to me, is like removing that barrier and allowing people like Linda in accounting to be able to create a Copilot or an app that like an engineer would never build because they just don't think that way is so exciting to me. And so that was what I was happy about.
Too. That's exactly how I think about SharePoint. I'm always like, listen, you are dangerous if you knew what I know. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to show you, because I know about SharePoint. I'm in the SharePoint world, but you as an accountant or you as an operations manager or whatever you are, if you saw what was at your fingertips, you become dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Way more than I could even think of, because I'm not in your space. But Nick, before we get out of here, do you got any thoughts about what Stephanie just
Well, I mean, I think I mainly just agree. I mean, I think the thing that I will say is that what's going on in Azure also is being simplified. I think it's worth going back and looking at that.
Okay.
I mean, some of the stuff that I find very interesting there is like the Azure AI search, for example, of being able to bring up your own index and apply RAG from Copilot Studio to that if there's stuff that you want Copilot Studio to be able to see that you don't want in your main body of Microsoft 365 data, for example. So I think the fact that all of these things are being plugged into one another, and perhaps that's something that your IT team or your outside support builds for you, and then just give you the API keys so you can go in and add that into the bots that you're building or the agents that you're building. So I do think it's interesting how we're getting the ability to slot in these different ingredients in completely new ways. Azure SQL, another example of that, or even RAG over Azure SQL. I mean, this opens up so many opportunities, such great potential that we didn't have before when we were simply looking at connector actions and graph connectors. Now we have a lot more going on there that we can potentially do for clients in terms of how they view their data.
Yeah,
That's a
power.
point. Yeah.
Massive amounts of power that we can put in the hands of these end users. So yes. Well, listen, we're about to check out of here. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show. But before you get out of here, where can people find you?
Well, I think the best place to find me right now is on LinkedIn. You can just look up Stephanie Roberto, Cincinnati. I have a newsletter that is kind of just deep reflections on my life as a consultant. I've been a consultant for 15 years. And some of what I've learned. My favorite one that I love plugging is that I think is really relevant is I did an article called How to Lose Your Job Like Dorothy Vaughan. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, it's Octavia Spencer, because unfortunately that's how we reference everything in the world. But Octavia Spencer's story in Hidden Figures, and I write an article about how you can take her bravery and apply it to this new age of digital transformation. And that's a really good one to look at, and just if you can get a taste for my writing style and some of the stuff I put out, see if it's something you want to subscribe to. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Good deal. Nick, what about you? What you got?
Well, it's an exciting week because I finally have something to talk about. Because I have a brand new course out, Thurman.
Nice.
So on-demand course on my website. I've been talking very enthusiastically about AI, but there are risks associated with AI that I believe we need to do more to communicate, particularly to the people who are using AI. So my new course, Responsible AI for Business Users, is designed for non-technical people to understand what are these risks. How do these generative AI tools work? Why do they get things wrong? And most importantly, we all see those warnings that say AI can be wrong, please check its work. But actually, what steps should you take to make sure that you're being safe while using it? Because I know a lot of people see that and either shrug their shoulders or wonder, well, what's the point of using this if I need to redo all the work to make sure it's right? So finding the balance there is really important. So there'll be a link to that down below in the description. And through to December 7th, I have a Black Friday / Cyber Monday kind of deal going on where you can get a discount as well. So there'll be a discount code down there too. How about you, Thurman?
Sweet. We love discounts. Listen, if you're a project manager, or if there are project managers inside of your organization, I talk about this all the time where you can build a risk register on SharePoint instead of building it on Excel. And there's a course for that. I have that course. It'll be down in the description. But I want you to consider the reason why you would want the project managers or the folks inside of your organization to do this is because it's not only making life better for them, it makes life better for those around them. So you put a project manager through the course, they take it, they come back. It's not just them that's now going to have a better risk register than they would have in Excel. When they manage these risks with their risk owners, it's way better. It's a much easier situation for them and those risk owners and for leadership. So when leadership needs them to report on information, this becomes easier. this is a great first step into knowing how SharePoint is powerful. And if you have project managers inside of your organization and they manage risk, I would implore you to send them to that link to let them know how to create a risk register in SharePoint. 2 million times better in Excel. All right. Appreciate you tuning in. Stephanie, again, thank you very much. Nick, as always, it's always a pleasure. Y'all have a good one. We'll see y'all in a couple weeks. Thank you.